Okay, I want you to picture something. A team of AI traders managing trillions of dollars, and they're operating at the speed of light. Now, these bots, they don't sleep, they don't take breaks, and they have a direct line into the world's payment systems. This isn't some far-off sci-fi movie. This is the reality that's unfolding in global finance right now. And it forces us to ask one absolutely critical question. Right. What actually stops one of these things from going haywire and tanking the entire global economy? And I'm not talking about a small mistake. I'm talking about a catastrophic error that ripples through the whole system because thousands of its AI clones all make the exact same bad call at the exact same millisecond. That is the core, terrifying question we're digging into today. We are going to explore a really groundbreaking new architecture designed to build a safety net for this wild financial future. So here's our game plan. We're going to break it all down into 5 key parts. First, we'll size up the threat. Then we'll introduce a totally new way to think about and measure risk. After that, we'll walk through a 5-layer safety net, tackle the really big monoculture problem, and finally, see how all this theory gets put into practice. All right, let's dive right into the problem itself. You see, the real danger here isn't just one AI making one mistake. The systemic risk, the big one that keeps people up at night, comes from something much sneakier. What happens when all the AIs start to think and act in perfect, synchronized, and potentially disastrous unison? The systems we're talking about have a name, Agentic AI. And you gotta forget about simple chatbots here. Think of these more like autonomous employees, a whole team of AI traders that can set their own goals, use real-world financial tools, and pull the trigger on massive trades, all without a human needing to sign off on every single action. Now, this slide is where it gets really, really scary. In the old world, right, if you had 100 human traders, their mistakes were mostly their own. They were independent. So the total loss is just, the sum of their individual screw-ups. But with AI, if they all share the same model, the same brain, they also share the exact same hidden flaws. So a single glitch can trigger what's called a common mode failure, where every single AI makes the same disastrous trade at the same time. The loss doesn't just add up, it multiplies. It scales not by n, but by n squared. And that is how a billion-dollar mistake spirals into a trillion-dollar catastrophe. So, to fight a completely new kind of risk, we need a completely new way to measure it. And this framework does just that, by breaking down safety into what it calls the 4 currencies. And no, we're not talking about money. We're talking about 4 distinct and auditable ways to make sure these systems are kept on a very short leash. These 4 currencies give us a really clear set of controls. First, you've got probabilistic safety. That's all about setting hard limits on how often a failure is even allowed to happen. Then there's energy and compute safety, which is basically a kill switch for an AI that starts trying to use infinite resources. Now, epistemic safety is super important. This is about forcing the AI to know what it doesn't know. It's basically building in a little voice that says, hey, I'm not confident enough to make this trade. And finally, social and environmental safety makes sure we're keeping an eye on real-world impacts like fairness, bias, and just how much energy this thing is burning. Okay, so we have these currencies, but how do we actually enforce them? Well, the solution is to build a fortress. It's a 5-layer safety net called the Finance-Grade Verifiable Governance Architecture, or FG-VGA for short. Just think of it as a series of nested defenses, where each layer is designed to catch failures the others might miss. And this whole architecture is pretty brilliant in its simplicity. The policy plane is the rulebook. It sets hard, non-negotiable limits on what an AI can and cannot do. The evidence plane is like the ultimate receipt. It creates an unbreakable audit trail for every single decision. The attestation plane is a digital ID check, making sure no unapproved or rogue AI can even get in the door. The systemic plane, that's the watchtower, specifically looking for that dangerous herd behavior we talked about. And finally, the sustainability plane is the energy meter, just keeping that resource use in check. And all of this brings us to the absolute heart of the matter. Remember that n-squared risk we talked about? The catastrophic cascade? It all comes from this one single point of failure, monoculture. So the biggest challenge we face is figuring out how to force these AIs not to think alike. Monoculture risk. That's the official name for this danger. It's what happens when your entire army of AI traders is built on the same foundation, the same model from the same vendor, trained on the same data. It creates this massive hidden vulnerability. All it takes is one unexpected market event, one tiny flaw in that shared model, and the entire system can collapse in perfect, terrifying harmony. So what's the solution? It's actually elegant and incredibly powerful.
a heterogeneity score, or HS. It's a single number from 0 to 1 that directly measures how differently two AI models think. It's simple. A high score is good. It means you have genuine diversity in your system. A low score? Well, that's a bright red alert. It means your AIs are dangerously similar and you are wide open to monoculture risk.
So you might be asking, where does this number come from? It's not magic. It's a weighted average of 3 really concrete measurements. First is output divergence. Pretty straightforward. Do the AIs give different answers to the same questions? Second is representation overlap. This is kind of like looking at two students' notes after a class. Are their internal brain structures mapping the information in truly different ways? And third, manifold distance. This basically measures how jumpy they are. If you give them a tiny nudge in the data, does one AI stay calm while the other freaks out? Big differences in how they react are a great sign of diversity. Look, this all sounds great in theory, right? But how do you actually make it work in the real, high-stakes world of finance? Well, this last section is all about turning these abstract ideas into hard physical controls that you can actually build.
This quote from the source material is the absolute key to everything. The goal isn't to be a fortune teller and predict every possible way an AI could fail. I mean, that's impossible. The goal is something called geometric safety. You design the whole system so that even if a failure does happen, its impact, its energy, is trapped inside safe, predefined limits.
And this is the most brilliant way to understand it. In Switzerland, they cap the speed of e-scooters at 20 kilometers per hour. Now, why that specific number? Because the physics of kinetic energy show that below that speed, the severity of most crashes is dramatically reduced. They aren't trying to prevent every single crash. They are shrinking the state space, the range of possible outcomes, to make sure that any crash is survivable. The exact same logic applies here. You cap things like exposure limits and diversity scores to make sure any failure is financially survivable.
And here is where the rubber really meets the road. A low heterogeneity score isn't just a flashing warning light. It triggers very real, very expensive consequences. You can see right here, as that score drops, as your AI diversity gets dangerously low, the governance actions become more and more severe. It goes from a simple standard approval to requiring more collateral to mandatory C-suite review, and finally to being completely forbidden from operating. And this isn't just some pipe dream. The source actually provides a clear 24-month blueprint for how to build this. And notice how it doesn't try to boil the ocean all at once. It starts with the basics, the gates, the caps, the logging, before rolling out the more complex stuff, like enforcing the heterogeneity score. This proves it's a practical, workable strategy for any big financial institution that's serious about this.
So what's the big takeaway here? We are, right now, in the process of designing and building the very cages for financial AI. And the architecture we've just walked through is arguably the most comprehensive blueprint we have. But it leaves us with one massive question for the future. As these AI systems become exponentially more powerful, will the cages we're building today be strong enough to hold what they become tomorrow?